transphobia, anti-Roma, Islamophobia, anti-Slavism, anti-democracy, anti-communism, of course, and quite peculiarly, two characteristics that have been quite present in 20th fascism, anti-liberalism and anti-scientificism. So with all those conditions, our colleagues and that you're here today, we have the possibility to talk about the different aspects of the keys that make us understand or help us to understand why this upsurge of fascism and why at this historic moment the most aggressive and savage versions of this movement are protagonists again. We will have to start with Christian Larios. Well, I have him here with me. He's an activist, anti-fascist, and the promoter of Popular Solidarity March, and he will talk about street anti-fascism. Christian, you've got the floor.
Hola, buenos días.
Well, good morning.
¿Se me escucha?
Can you hear me?
Ante todo quisiera hacer, como ha dicho el compañero,
Well,
una mención, y es que yo voy a tratar el tema antifascista desde el punto de vista de calle, el antifascismo popular, como suele decirse. Si bien es cierto que el antifascismo de calle siempre ha sido como la oveja negra por los medios de comunicación en manos de dichos medios, y muchas veces se ha malinterpretado. Y quisiera dejar bien claro que el antifascismo de calle, popular, nunca debe de tratarse ni visualizarse como dos grupos de seguidores ultras de fútbol que quedamos para pegarnos. No. Eso, ante todo, cualquier cosa que se parezca a eso no es antifascismo, por favor. También hay que dejar claro que la lucha antifascista no puede verse solo como una lucha contra el reaccionismo, contra el fascismo al uso, sino también debe verse como una lucha contra el sistema capitalista en todas sus formas. ¿Vale? De hecho, me da a valer de una frase de la película de Novecento que decía aquello de que el fascismo no surge de la noche a la mañana, sino que es algo que se va cultivando. Esto es muy importante porque debemos de entender el antifascismo como una lucha contra el sistema. Vale que el fascismo es el perro del sistema, pero no solo debemos de quedarnos en el perro, debemos ir hacia el amo, el que lo alimenta. Como hemos dicho y seguiremos diciendo, el fascismo podemos describirlo como una reacción del sistema ante las reivindicaciones de la lucha de la clase trabajadora. En cuanto la clase trabajadora se empieza a organizar, a luchar, a reivindicar, y el sistema, la oligarquía, la burguesía, empieza a perder en esa lucha, empieza a enviar a sus perros, lo que es el fascismo.
And that's what we call fascism, of course.
Entrando más en detalle, lo que es mi trabajo de lucha de calle,
that's my area of work, the street fight.
Por mi experiencia, os puedo clasificar dos espacios antifascistas. El espacio clásico, que estamos bastante acostumbrados a ver, la típica plataforma antifascista o la típica coordinadora antifascista. Y el otro espacio es que, siendo antifascista, también no es una característica como la anterior, o sea, hay muchísimos matices que los diferencian de las anteriores. Pues es una lucha basada en la solidaridad, en el proceso de empoderamiento de las masas, ¿vale? Y ahí es donde entra lo que es en juego por ejemplo,
And
la
I
red de
think that
solidaridad
here we
popular.
have also this popular solidarity network.
Para entrar más en detalle de las dos formas de
To
organizarse
give you more
y de los
detail
dos
on the
espacios,
two ways of getting organized in the two
voy a
spaces,
clasificar y hablar un poco
I
de
would like to
características más
classify
comunes
and
que
talk
podemos ver
about
en las
characteristics, the
plataformas de los
most
coordinadores
common
antifascistas.
characteristics that we can
Si
see.
por algo se caracteriza estos dos espacios es porque
These
las
two
personas que lo
spaces
integran
have a main
son
characteristic, and it's
personas
that the people
concienciadas, son
who
personas que vienen de
are
organizaciones, de
part of it,
sindicatos.
they have
Y
they're
desde el
very much aware.
principio
They come
hasta
from
el
trade
final
unions, etc. And
de
from
dicho
beginning to
espacio
end,
está conformado
in that
por ese
space,
núcleo de
it's all
personas
formed
concienciadas.
by
Que, ojo, no
a
quiere decir que,
core of
que esté mal, todo lo que está
people
perfecto.
with
Sin embargo, lo que
high
encontramos
awareness,
es
and
otro
that's good.
espacio
I'm
que es
not
el
saying
espacio de
that's bad, but
solidaridad,
we also find a
como
space of
lo que es la RSP.
solidarity.
Si bien es cierto que en un principio
These
el
are
núcleo
these
está conformado
PSR.
por
And if it's true that at the beginning the
personas con
core is
conciencia, de organizaciones
constituted by
políticas, de
people with political
sindicatos, de
consciousness,
otros espacios
people
y
from trade
plataformas,
unions and
al final
other
lo que trata
associations, at the
dicho
end of the
espacio es
day,
de, mediante
that
el tejer
space
tejido
tries
social
to sow
y
this
entre las clases trabajadoras,
social
clases
network
populares,
with the
lo
working
que estamos
class,
afianzando es un proceso de
and we're trying
empoderamiento que
to
permita
create this empowering process
a la derecha
that
retroceder,
would allow the far
retroceder en los
right
barrios,
to
porque
back
si a
in the
día de hoy nos
neighborhoods, for
encontramos muchas
example,
veces los
because
problemas
we know that
en el pleno siglo XXI,
nowadays we
y
find
no es otro de
problems, and
que en
that's easy
muchos
in
barrios
this 21st century, in many
obreros el
neighborhoods, in
concepto
working class neighborhoods, the
de
concept
clase,
of class
el
or social
concepto de
class,
solidaridad,
the concept
totalmente
of
se ha perdido.
solidarity has been
Por
completely
ello digo que es
lost.
que
That's
la
why
lucha
I say that this
no solo debe
fight
ser una lucha
mustn't
de
only
cuerpo a
be
cuerpo, entendiendo esto como
like a body
manifestaciones,
fight,
concentraciones,
understanding that
etcétera,
as
etcétera,
a
sino también debe ser una
protests,
lucha cultural, una lucha contra
um,
la
so
hegemonía
demonstrations. No, it
del
also has to
sistema.
be a cultural
Entonces,
fight against
una vez
these
que nosotros
the control of the system.
somos capaces de,
So
en un barrio,
once we're
generar
able in a
un
neighborhood,
espacio
we're
como
able
es
to
la RSP,
generate a space like this
que
popular
atraiga a los
solidarity
vecinos, a las
network
masas,
that would
y
attract
genere un
people
tejido,
and neighbors to, and it can
podemos decir
generate
entonces
this
que
this
ese
network,
espacio lo
then we can
estamos
say
ganando
that that
tanto
space
al
is being
fascismo,
taken
lo que es como al
from
sistema.
fascism and from the system as well.
Y yo,
And
por mí,
well,
esta es mi introducción, ya estaría.
this was my introduction. I think that that's all I wanted to say. Well, thank you, Christian. I'm being told that we're going to change the order of our agenda because Kate Hudson has to leave soon. So she asked if she could talk now. She's a member of the European Labs direction. She coordinates the working group on fascism and far right. She comes from United Kingdom. And I have to say something important. The conclusions of this meeting will be presented on Wednesday in the European Forum of processed we have Rafael Morales, the president of La Desbandá, and to participate virtually, you have to register. We will give you the link, but it's important for you to know that you have to register. We're going to give Kate Hudson the floor.
Thanks very much indeed, and it's a great pleasure to be here on behalf of the working group of the European Left. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to the memory of all those whose lives were destroyed by fascist forces on the road to Almería, and to all those who resisted, fought and died in the struggle against fascism in Spain. And it's an honour, a real honour for me today to be part of this event. During my own political development, the struggle of the Spanish Republic and the courage of those who went from around the world to aid Spain was of fundamental importance. And I remember well many British comrades who were part of the international brigades. The example that you set in memory of those fallen and your continued work today is a powerful one. It's an example to all those across Europe who face the prospect of the far right on the rise again. We are seeing the biggest upsurge of the far right since the 1930s, from street attacks and mobilizations to high government office. They use Islamophobia, racism, anti-Semitism to spread hate and fear. They attack trade unionists and the left and the rights and liberties of us all. This must be stopped, and we must be united across Europe and internationally to defeat this immensely dangerous political turn. Alongside all of you, our European Left Working Group aims to contribute to this unity and to help build international cooperation. The problems we face are not national problems, they are international problems and can only be solved on that basis. The far right itself is increasingly internationalized. Over the past 4 years, they gained succor from the Trump White House, and they are well funded and well organized. We have seen the impact that has had beyond Europe too. In Brazil under Bolsonaro, for example, a presidency that is a catastrophe on every level. The handling of the coronavirus pandemic by populist leaders such as Trump, Bolsonaro and Johnson has shown their incapacity to address such a serious problem in the interests of the people and their cavalier approach to human life. But the coronavirus pandemic is also giving some possibilities to the far right to grow. In Britain, at the beginning of the pandemic, we found that the far right was losing profile and support, and that social solidarity was rising. But as the months go on, we have faced an ideological onslaught from anti-vaxxers, from people who think it is their right not to wear a mask, that freedom means ignoring public health restrictions. The pandemic has also made social inequalities much clearer. The inadequacies of neoliberal economics and the failure of governments to prepare for a pandemic. Every government knew that such a pandemic was likely, that they have been identified as major security threats. But as in the case of Britain, health spending has been decreased and spending on nuclear weapons and militarism has been increased. Understanding why the far right are rising again is fundamental to challenging them effectively. Blocking their road in a lasting fashion is inconceivable without addressing the economic and political conditions, austerity and its consequences, which have enabled their re-emergence. But it is possible to do that. And while the far right has become stronger, they and their ideas are not the majority. In Britain, we have found there to be huge political reserves of support for multiracialism and social solidarity. And this is also the case on an international scale. The defensive struggle against racism and the far right has to be turned into an offensive, also against the neoliberal right, which has done so much to create the conditions for the rise of the far right, as well as for the pandemic surge. Inequalities have been magnified by the pandemic. It is not true that it is a great leveller. Those in working class communities are most affected by the virus, and in particular, we have seen a big impact on the Black and minority ethnic communities. In the US and elsewhere, this has led to increased popular protest, and taken together with the brutality of the US police, has led to the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. It has mobilized extensively to oppose racism and to remove the trappings of colonialism that remain in many of our societies. In the US, we have seen significant conflict where far-right militias attempt to defeat the mobilizations of youth and oppressed communities. These are all part of the same struggle, and we have seen victories too. In Greece, the defeat of Golden Dawn, where following a long process and massive popular mobilization, the judges ruled the neo-fascist Golden Dawn was a criminal organization in disguise. This court verdict has ramifications for the far right across Europe and is an important step forward. Another victory has come in Bolivia, where the Trump-backed far-right coup has been overthrown in democratic elections and Mas has been restored to government with a huge mandate. Trump's attempts to overthrow the left in Latin America, part of his far-right crusade, is not succeeding. Attempts to overthrow the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela have also failed. But much work remains to be done. We have two forthcoming events organised by our working group, which will address these key issues in more depth and from an internationalist perspective. On the 11th of November, we are organising a seminar at the European Forum, which is online this year. We are very pleased to welcome a representative from Desbandá, as well as Diane Abbott, MP from Britain, the former Shadow Home Secretary, who was a strong campaigner against racism and in support of Black Lives Matter. We will also welcome comrades from Portugal, from Germany and from Poland, where the far-right government has launched a massive attack on women's rights, making abortion illegal under virtually all circumstances. In March of next year, together with Die Linke and the European Left Party, we are organising the second No Pasarán conference, this time in Berlin. It is named for your struggle in Spain and the inspiration it has given to succeeding generations. The aim of the No Pasarán conference is to look at the rise of the far right in the current context, the US post-election, including potential economic and military threats, the impact of the pandemic and the economic crisis, and the racist upsurge in the Black Lives Matter movement. We will look at what is happening and why, how the far right uses these events, and how we resist. The event will be inclusive and aims to bring together a wide range of grassroots activists, intellectuals, trade unionists, and politicians. We will address the onslaughts on the Roma, on refugees and asylum seekers, on migrant rights, and the policing of the Mediterranean, which is turning it into a graveyard. We want to strengthen a radical left counter-narrative to overcome the ideological advances of the far right that have pervaded mainstream institutions and discourse. The defence of people's rights will be an important thread, including those of women, of workers and trade unionists, as well as our diverse communities that are under attack, including disabled people and LGBTQ people. We want to develop and strengthen European-wide mobilising in all these areas. One of our aims is to help movement building in individual countries across Europe and to use the process of building the conference as a means of drawing different movements together, a bit like the preparatory process that used to take place in the social forum movement. But it's not clear now whether that process will be so possible owing to the current public health restrictions. In any case, the No Pasarán conference will go ahead in Berlin in March 2021 as a hybrid event, including both in-person and online events. We very much hope that Desbandá will participate and share your knowledge, commitment, and experience with all those fighting against fascism and the far right. Thank you very much, and solidarity.
Thank you very much, Kate Hudson, for your speech. And we're going to continue with the order we had in the agenda. Luis Suarez Carreño will have the floor. He comes from the Association of Victims and Family Members of Frankism. He's a member of the commune related to Franco regime, also a partner and a march participant of La Desbandá since 2017. Luis, you have the floor in general. Well, we have 8 minutes, so try to stick to that plan. Thank you.
Buenos días, voy a intentar ser rápido. Tenía
Good
una
morning.
presentación.
I'm going to try and be quick.
¿Cómo puedo anular el sonido? ¿Cómo puedo anular el sonido de la traducción?
Ponga el canal español. Ponga el canal de español en lugar de inglés. So I had a presentation, but I'm not going to share it with you because that would take longer. In the commune, we work in the different ways that we need to work, fight fascism. We work on 3 lines. First of all, how to fight against for impunity and against the unfairness of the crimes of Frankism. And secondly, we work on awareness raising, training.
Actividades unitarias, manifestaciones, movilizaciones sociales, etc. Bien, el contexto en el que nos situamos es un país sin memoria democrática.
Social actions and so on. This context is of a country with no historical memory. There's a resistance against the new forms of fascism. Is in oblivion of the Frankism and transition. The 40 years of Frankism plus the transition with the imposed oblivion plus the years of silence have led to young generations that are ignored, apolitical, who are vulnerable to the neo-fascism. This phenomenon can be seen on the media, institutions, but also at the educational level, as we can see in the book by Enrique Díaz-Gutiérrez, where we see studies about the lack of information about these topics in schools and high schools. In Spain, only private cultural and artistic productions have been able to avoid this intellectual scheme. The right takes profit of this silence to recover the discourse of Frankism. We can see that in Madrid with regards to also in Caballero y Prieto. We also have the vindication of monarchy, but as we can see in the video of intellectuals, and also what we've seen in the Spanish Parliament, where the father of Pablo Iglesias was accused in public of being a terrorist. So these are situations where the battle for the narrative is where this is taking place, and we say that memory and the historical narrative are key, just like traditions and religions too. The material power is the ultimate goal, but the ideological power is a way of conquering and preserving the material power. So new fascism also know that through the mechanisms of democracy we can reach the power and then change democracy, as we saw in France or Germany in the last century. Memory is in a territory in the middle, in between the objectivity of facts and their interpretation. Democratic memory is a collective ideological construct that tries to be based on human rights and the fight in order to apply the lessons from the past to the present, and it requires educational programs, legislation against racism that will be inclusive policies that will defend the search for truth. And yesterday we had a presentation by the Secretary of State, and I belong to a platform that is fighting for the Center of Memory of the Prison of Caraballo. And in the draft, in the bill that is the Parliament right now on democratic memory is very limited, because it refers to sites of memory as monuments and landmarks, but not as centers where we can interpret, analyze, and educate in this field. Irati Moich is the director of the Guernica Center, and she said in the in a publication, we are the TV we watch, the museums we visit. And in this sense, museum and interpretation centers define what we are. And in Spain, we have art museums, technology museums, science museums, but we have no museums on human rights, for example, because we're supposed to learn that in a natural way or in an inspired, divine way. But the history has shown that that's not the case. In Spain, this is even more obvious than in other countries in Europe, Latin America, Asia, or Africa. In this sense, Spain, and particularly Madrid, is a country and a city where we have nothing. Here in this meeting of the disbandment, we referred to what Ana Marta said this morning, the need of the exhibition that was announced by the Secretary of State, that of course is going to be very interesting and important, and apparently the government is planning this for next year on the disbandment. But a center of interpretation on the disbandment would be more important, with the historical and scientific approach, but where we can also link what happened in the past with what's going on today. You know, the disbandment and the massacre, the slaughtering of migrants in the Mediterranean today. That's a center where we need to educate new generations on democracy and human rights. This is not guaranteed, as many believe. In Madrid, the only landmarks related to memory, the historical memory, are those that remember fascism, the Arch of Victory and the Valley of the Fallen, and there's no interpretation from the point of view of human rights. In the commune, we work in high schools, giving talks, we explain our experience as fighters against fascism, and we relate that to what's going on today, with the fight today against the law, Mordaza, repression, and the lack of freedom. We also draft and prepare materials. We're carrying out and organizing an activity on the defense of democracy, and we also have a blog in eldiario.es, this digital newspaper, and we also organize activities on Granados, things that have been forgotten. We also do events on witch antiques killing, and we try to link everything we do with what's going on nowadays. We also carried out work on a topic that has given us a lot of visibility. The Silence of Others is the title of a documentary film that has been broadcasted all over the world, and it went to the Goya Awards, and it's a documentary film on the fight against impunity. So, we also work in many different platforms, street platforms in relation to the human rights, and for example, the right to decide in Catalonia. In platform, there is a platform that is fighting against the media and that defends the right to self-determination in Catalonia, and we are involved with this, and we will continue with our engagement there. So, what to do when facing the upsurge of far-right? And I don't know, it's really complex, but at the same time, I'd say that we just have to wake up and react. Thank you.
Muy bien, Luis. Muchas gracias y por esa contundencia.
Thank you very much, Luis, and thank you for that very clear conclusion. In the next European Forum of Progressive Forces, it will be great to have a representation of the disbandment so that we can spread the fight against fascism that is currently absolutely necessary. Now we will give the floor to Manuel Ruiz Garcia, who's the president of the Association of Victims of Franquism, who's also a member of Commune, brother of Arturo Ruiz, who was killed by a group, an ultra-right group. Good morning. Before I give my speech, I'd like to share with you a video, a 4-minute video that David has prepared. And it's a great video that will sum up many of the things I want to tell you about.
¿Me oís?
Sí, te estamos oyendo.
Can you hear me? Yes, we hear you, but I will have this signal when you have just 2 minutes left so that we know more or less where we are at. David, you can play the video, please.
Hola. Si no ponemos el vídeo, si queréis paso a la intervención.
If the video cannot be shared, I will just start with my presentation and then just let me know when the video is ready. Well, as Andrés mentioned, I am a member of the Commune and I represent the Andalusian Association of Victims of the Transition Period, and it's an association that was created only a year ago. The ecology, feminism associations were all fighting, many associations are fighting against this silence, this policy of imposed silence with regards to the crimes against humanity that were carried out by the dictatorship of Franquism and the transition. As direct victims or family members of victims, or just as citizens, we vindicate our right to the truth that will allow us to have justice, as any state should require. We've all suffered this transition to the democratic system without clearing things. 10 of the members of the court, of Franco's court, were members of the new court created, the national court created in a democracy. That's not very logical. The Spanish courts recognized the human rights crimes that took place after the year 2000, but not before that. The FACWA has presented a proposal to modify the criminal code so that crimes against humanity that took place before the year 2000 will be taken into account. With this change in the criminal code, they would have to be judged. We also have the law, amnesty law of 77, and on the 23rd of January, there was a protest to defend an amnesty, and this law was used to protect people who were torturing victims. And those protesters could not imagine that was the way this law would be used. 591 people died during the transition, so it was not so soft. Nearly 200 of them were really linked to police violence. The crimes that were committed during that time, most of them have not been judged, and nothing has been done with regards to them. I wanted to mention that FEACWA has launched a campaign against Martín Villa. Martín Villa has been accused of 12 crimes. What happened in Vitoria on the 3rd of March, there were trade union protests and 5 workers died. He's also been accused of the Black Week in Madrid, where my brother Arturo died, and he's also accused of the police violence in 1978. Martín Villa is in this video where we see where he started in the cell with the students' trade union creation to be able to control the movement of students. Then he was a civil governor, also minister, and he's been minister of the Interior Affairs. Okay, let's see the video. It's just a 3 or 4 minute video. So here we go. There is no sound.
¿Lo estáis escuchando?
Can you hear it? Well, apparently there's sound now, but I don't really hear much. I'm sorry, I don't get the sound. So I'll just read what we see on the screen. So many crimes of state took place under his mandate. On the 3rd of March, 1976, in Vitoria-Gasteiz, another 2 people were killed in solidarity events. In Tarragona, and the 23rd and 4th, during the mobilizations in favor of amnesty, fascist shooters, and the video is gone. Sorry. They're going to try and play it again. So by the forces, security forces. Well, anyway. I don't know if you could hear it. Did you hear it? But in any case. Oh, we just had to read the screen, what's written on the screen. I'm going to try to keep my mic open so to see if you can hear the sound. But in any case, apparently it's mainly what we can read on the screen. So, in order to force the opposition to abandon and accept the reform of the Suarez government, Francoism maintained and went against human rights. The law on amnesty gave impunity to those who were responsible of Francoist genocide. Martín Villa was one of the main people responsible, and this was what his political itinerary was after that. Name Rodolfo, surname Martín Villa, born on the 3rd of October 1934. Head of the national head of the Students' Trade Union, civil governor, minister of trade union relationships or relations with the trade unions, minister for governance, minister for the interior, member of the Senate. During his mandate, many crimes of the state took place. On the 3rd of March 1976, 5 workers were killed in Vitoria-Gasteiz. 2 people were killed in solidarity events. In January, during the protests for the amnesty law, fascist policemen killed a student, and then that same night, the ultra-right movement killed 5 lawyers. 7 people were killed by the security orders on the 4th of December 1977 during the protest for the autonomy of Andalusia. A young trade unionist was killed in the Scala case. There was a fire that was used to criminalize the CNT. On the 8th of July 1978, the armed police was shooting people. A young man was killed and many injured. These are only some of the cases during protests or outside of them where people were killed and shot. Franco recognized his merit in 5 occasions, and democracy did it 3 times. The last time was in 2017. So let's put an end to impunity, to his impunity. Between 1976 and 79, Villa Martín was minister and responsible for many crimes. He has been accused, but his responsibilities should also be cleared in the courts in Spain. We demand a trial of Martín Villa. Thank you, Manuel. I don't know if you'd like to add something. Can you hear me? In the video, I can also send it to any of you if you'd like to see it again. You've seen his political itinerary, but we've seen that he's been working into 45 companies, such as Cable, the Prisa Group, and in most companies in the IBEX 23 index of the stock market. In Argentina, the courts accused him, and there was a warrant to arrest him, an international warrant to arrest him, and the only country where he was protected was in Spain. In Argentina, the justice has tried to take him to declare before the Vini judge in court number 1, in the Argentinian court number 1, and in Spain there have been many blocks and barriers so that he doesn't go to Argentina. And in 2013 he received an order to not respond to Argentinian justice. This order was revoked not long ago by the state prosecutor, and he finally went to declare in the Argentinian embassy, and ex-members of the governments and everybody that belonged to the 78th regime came out to defend him. Or even politicians who are currently working, like the Borrell, Mr. Borrell, who's the head of the European diplomacy. And I find this is terribly serious. And all these people have been defending him, and there's also someone who defended him and even said that measures should be taken against those who accuse him, and that's Felipe González. When my brother died, Felipe González said he was on our side, and now he wants the judge to go against me because I presented a claim against him, against Martín Villa. Finally, I'd like to refer to someone who is responsible for me being active in these sorts of activities, and for the fact that I am now trying to recover memory and justice. Chato Galante. Chato Galante died not long ago as a consequence of COVID-19, and Chato is the greatest example of someone who dies without justice being made for him. He died as a criminal, and his crime had been fighting against Francoism's impunity and to find justice. And he died before finding justice. And Billy El Niño was the one who tortured him, and he also died with a terrible impunity. And Billy El Niño is someone who tortured, and that's because the media says so, and we say so too, but justice never said he was a torturer. He hasn't been judged. He wasn't submitted to a trial. And the Chato Galante's claim is going to continue because he was tortured by Billy El Niño, but also but by other people too. So his claims will continue. And yesterday, the Secretary of State referred to the new prosecutor's office they want to set up. And, well, what he was saying, you know, sounded really well, really good, but we'll see what happens in the end. Well, I've been told that my time is over. And in the commune, to finish with, I'll just say that in the commune, we're doing a new campaign called Other Tortures, so that people can understand that there's a long list of tortures, not only Billy and Niño. Thank you very much, Manuel. I am sorry for the limited times we have, because of course we have a lot to say, particularly because this impunity seems to be still here, still alive. Those who defended Martín Villa also defended the king, our previous king. Manuel Pineda, are you there? Manuel? Manuel, aren't you connected? He's in Russia right now, and perhaps he had a problem and couldn't get online. So now I will give the floor to Ángel del Río, who's the delegate of Hudson in Andalusia. He's a professor in the Pablo de Olavide University in Seville, and also a good friend of mine. And he's going to tell us about how to teach memory. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Andres, for your introduction. And my presentation is going to be very brief. And this question, what to do in this new situation of the upsurge of far right? And I'd like to refer to the memory as a way to prevent fascism. And I'd like to do it from a personal point of view, as my personal experience as a teacher, and also because I'm a delegate of Amicus in Andalusia, and I've been working in many talks and events in high schools, all sorts of activities on the topic on which I've been working. Some aspects of the slaves of Franco, the issue of mass graves, and what happened during the Franco's regime. This is a personal experience, but also a shared experience, because I've shared a lot, well, my concerns and training with other people in the university and in the high schools. And we also have a network on the memory and the prevention of fascism. And it's called Never Again, Nunca Más. In Catalonia and in Valencia, there's this network, but also there are many other initiatives here in Andalusia of people who've been doing this because they wanted to create these sort of networks for the memory.
I would normally, and I've been working with these memory for many years with students. When we started to deal with it, we devoted several sessions to this. I usually start with a debate or inquiry to get to know what knowledge they hold on this issue. For example, the exile, the Franco repression, etc. And most of the people, most of the students, I'm talking about first, second, and third year students, different degrees in social sciences. Most of them, as Luis said in his intervention, most of them have virtually a total lack of knowledge. And the rest of them, most of them, well, I asked them where you got it from, and a small proportion of them, it comes from high school, standard education. Another part comes from fiction, so documentaries or the media. And a small part comes from family, the memory of the family. So there we find a problem in its roots, and it's the power of oblivion. In spite of all that work that's been done, this is a reality, the lack of knowledge. And also not because these topics are not part of the school curriculum. Well, they are there in a very maybe subtle way, not in a deep, profound way. And also there is another problem, and that is which are the sources of information to acquire the knowledge in these topic, which is so significant at a social level. One can think that we live in a kind of a bubble because we were linked to this movement, but a person who's outside all of it, where do they socialize? We know, and Luis has mentioned that as well, that the media, mass media, if we listen to debates, we read the news, most of them, I don't know if this is a supremacy, but I know it's quite dominant. Most of those media continue with this discourse of the negation, you know, historical neo-Francoism is still there. And when that doesn't happen, and I even consider this even worse, because we identify the other one quite well, but this is even worse. This discourse of, you know, we are progressive, and they talk about the theory of the two devils. So both of the two parts were evil to look for agreement. I think that's even more dangerous because they manipulate characters like Chavez Nogales and you know, looking for the third Spain, where there is a vindication of those who do not want to take a position. And this is a very important problem in the sense that, you know, studying these topics in depth, we find it quite hard because this law of historic memory of Andalusia, it already had in it the idea of taking this to high schools, and they didn't comply with it. The last part of the mandate of Susana Diaz, it was approved, but it sort of got blocked. It wasn't put into practice, but we have to say that no matter what the law is, we have to have a strong will. And I wanted to sort of give a round of applause to the great amount of teachers that just by themselves, with their own means, and in an important and a difficult situation with, you know, with the parents' control, etc. It's very hard to prepare a topic like this historic memory, because, you know, this parental control can be taken with things that are not only, you know, sexology or stuff like that, but also these kind of topics. And there are teachers that are taking the effort of in creating and preparing transversal activities where it's not only history, but they also talk about literature, ethics, and you see the possibility of bringing this kind of movement. So bringing testimonies from outside or taking students to those places of memory. In Seville, we took students, high school students and degree students to the channel of prisoners. You know that there is a pharaonic work done by slaves, and that is a great experience for those students. Well, and I say here in Granada, because that's where I am. I know that there are also associations for justice and reparation, and they take students to the grave of Lorca, and where there are thousands of people, and that's also an unforgettable experience for students. So it's a place where they do some kind of performance, or they pay homage to all of this. And of course, a visit to Mauthausen, that changes them. And I have to say that the work done, you know, with this pedagogy of the memory, the works done are very effective. For me, it's like a vaccination against fascism, because these young people know, they know how to reinterpret those the abuse of the past. They know how to bring it to the present. So nowadays they have problems like, for example, and Andres mentioned them, homophobia, you know, male chauvinism, sexism, racism, etc. And even though they do not suffer in themselves, I think this is very important, because all of this pedagogy makes them feel humble, and you know, they learn from the suffering of the other people. That's what we can learn from those in the movement Never Again, Nunca Más. And, Reyes Mate, the philosopher, already warned us that the Spanish state was one of the states with the lowest level of memory culture. And this comes determined sometimes by fiction. But, we have so much historiographic production, which is a high quality one. And we, of course, have documentaries, etc. So even counting on all of that, we still need to generate significant movement so that all of that can go into the classroom. Some teachers said, our main problem is that, they know we have a lot of didactic resources in general, but they say we have to do it ourselves. And for me, this is a very important experience, the topic of teacher training. So the importance of having teacher training programs with courses and memory materials that they can use in the classroom. So the classroom could be the production territory for that antidote for fascism or any other kind of totalitarian ideology, where youngsters and young people can be present. Sometimes I get quite emotional when we carry out these works every year, because they feel a kind of a rage in the face of the lack of knowledge. So they say, how is it possible that there is a concentration camp here next to my home and I didn't know about it? Concentration camps with more than 5,000 people, with one of the greatest irrigation works of Andalusia that was made by, of course, slaves, to offer irrigation to lands that belong to the great landowners of Andalusia, of the coup d'etat that took place. So the water brings that richness to the same people again and again. So that kind of thing in the same place, and sometimes counting on the participation of, well, not prisoners because we don't have any, but family members of those. So all of that means a step forward, because that is how the students with that didactic proposal, that's how they can establish where the red line of fascism is, so where you can reach. And I would like to end up saying that yesterday I called a few members, a few colleagues from my high school to, get some information about this Vox phenomenon. And it's been very much welcomed by many young people. So my question was if the pedagogy of these memory courses has helped or not. And they say that debate is generated in class. So they start to understand, how could it be that we have a project with those things being said, and how there are youngsters who can actually follow that kind of party. So this pedagogy of the memory is a fundamental tool to fight against all of this. Well, thank you very much, Angel. You said a couple of things that are very important. And Spain is one of the countries with the lowest rate of memory culture, memory-related culture. And together with Portugal, but we didn't kick the dictator out, and that stays there. Teachers know that working precarious situation, it's eliminating the freedom of teaching, because teachers are afraid of bringing up certain contents, and that's part of the process of discipline against the population, of course. Well, Manuel Pineda doesn't seem to be connected, but we have here Francique. I guess that Kate or Kat, like in French, but I'm sorry if I don't introduce you properly. And from the Department of Modern Languages and Literature, Virginia from the United States. She will talk to us about the link between the memory of the possessed of those disappeared in Franquism and the activism of ideological followers. Well, I am very much aware of the time constrictions. My reflections of this morning, they're born through activism and historical memory that are claiming against the impunity of crimes, and they want to foster the memory of those people who unfortunately disappeared. Those associations were born by victims whose family members are claiming for the right to bury their family members with dignity. Currently, they're complying with the claiming of human rights, and to go further from the grave. In a case study of the Association AMEDE, an Association for the Recovery of Democratic Memory of San Fernando, Cádiz, these the partners of AMEDE. They get the memory of those as a main stone in a movement, in an anti-fascist movement of the neoliberal state of the year of the 21st century. I took the messages from a WhatsApp group. These are elements that represent the movement in general, their commitment with awareness raising and education of citizenship on memory, and also their active solidarity with other civilian platforms and civic platforms that fight with the policies of inclusion and dignity for everybody. Particularly interesting in the case of group communication of AMEDE is the genius elaboration of a kind of a family album where there are very narrow links against those killed and partners that identify as ideological descendants. The analysis of the AMEDE discourse allows us to work in a wider sense, the civil responsibility in the building of an equalitarian society, sharing with what Andrés Piqueras named in a recent publication, structural violence of this capitalist society. As a theoretical basis, I mentioned the philosopher that Andrés mentioned before as well. That talks about the ethic need to rescue from oblivion the truth of the past, truth which has been crushed by the winners of the official history. Mate, one of the researchers in the work of Walter Benjamin, highlights the value of memory documents and their possibility of bringing collective interventions to defend those who died without being able to develop their own vital projects. Those that were killed transmit through generations, through tales and legends, their painful experiences until this becomes political action. So in terms by Benjamin, the invisible legacy of those Republican projects, which didn't take place, to create a fair society, they never disappeared completely. That was still there in next generations as the seed of hope. The intervention of AMEDE in San Fernando, they do not only bring to light the remains of the exhumated victims, but they also show their ideological values, which have been cased for a very long time. The passionate commitment by AMEDE with the movement, with the citizens' movement as the most efficient way of action against the supremacy in the public sphere is constantly expressed in this WhatsApp group. Users every day show in their protests, etc., in Cádiz, Andalusian, other parts of Spain, they show not only publicity for events, but they get organized to travel together to several places and cities to defend environment, public education, gender equality, the rights of refugees, and how not truth, justice, and reparation. The hashtags that they share among them are like a GPS that follows them in their movement for the Spanish population, whoever is in government. They say, let's save Santi Petre, those who are stay, and against these the male chauvinism plaques shown in San Fernando with the hashtag Gaditano al carajo los azulejos, which means let's just put an end to this. These electoral results would give the majority to the right parties, even Vox. And before the elections, in the message group of AMEDE, there was a great debate on which would be the best way to take part in future social projects. The dialogue established deals with the need for citizens associations to keep their autonomy and be separate from the administration. One of the most significant partners said, villages and cities have to raise their awareness, they have to get empowered, and to some extent, that's what we're doing. Something that they hate in the government, so not to get the power, to be empowered. In the several protests that took place in Andalusia on the 4th of December of the year 2018, with posts like Andalusia is not the place for fascism, etc., many AMEDE partners put into practice their policy of take the streets. This group WhatsApp messages serve as a kind of melting pot, digital melting pot, where the traces of those killed and the aggressors even are again visible. Political actions of those in the past get together with the expressions of values of nowadays, and they bring that anti-fascist legacy out, with something which was buried for a long time. The 8th of March of 2019, International Women's Day, the pictures of partners that took part in demonstrations in Cádiz, Madrid and San Fernando were published together with at a newspaper where there was a massive demonstration in Las Ventas in Madrid in March 1936. Both of them were published together. And in another picture of 1936, we see the mayor who was shot together with his three children. And those pictures, after the war, they show the happy neighbors in a working class neighborhood next to the mayor and a fountain with water running thanks to the actions of the Republican Council. And there is another representative of this message group given information of the platform María del Sur fighting against the privatization of water in Spain. There's another picture of post-war with the clerical Recaredo García Sabater presiding the opening of mackerel factory. The depression that put an end to 200 citizens. And in these WhatsApp messages, the image of this person whose name reminds us the link between fascism and church, it brings after that a virtual defense of the same values that were defended by Republicans in the past. They said, less churches, more hospitals, more drinking water and less holy water, less religion and more education. A fight to the reconnaissance of the disappearance of Francoism victims is still on more than 80 years later. There has been a lack of political will, but not citizens' will. Thank you.
Pues muchísimas gracias, Franci, por haberte ajustado también al tiempo y gracias.
Thank you very much, Franci, for having respected your time, and also I'd like to thank also all our speakers today, because you've all really made an enormous effort to try and reduce and summarize such complex topics in such a limited time. I think this is the beginning for us to stay in contact so that we can continue reinforcing the networks of this anti-fascist movement that we absolutely need to build at the international level. We will give the floor to our rapporteur, Fernando Díaz-Haro, who's president of the Forum for the Memory of Andalusia, who is going to summarize the presentations by the members of the roundtable, and afterwards we will have time for questions. Also, if anyone would like to make a comment or anything, we will have a few minutes for questions and comments after the rapporteur's presentation. And this is going to be quite difficult. We've had brilliant interventions, and that's going to be very difficult already. I'd like to highlight in Christian Larios' presentation, well, I'd like to highlight the importance of this anti-fascist struggle in the street, not, of course, destroying and breaking things and, you know, things that, of course, the news love to show on TV, where they can criminalize the young people and leftists too, but that it's important to create networks of people who are fighters against fascism, who are going to generate social fabric and awareness, and how to fight and how to do this, because this in Spain is particularly necessary. We absolutely need this network of fighters, of young people presenting alternatives in our everyday lives. Now, Luis Suárez Carreño and his presentation, he said that fighting for the memory is democratic memory is fighting for the memory, and he's talking that these practices that were destroyed in the past, and we need to vindicate them, and we need to defend those people, because this currently nowadays also lead to a situation where we can defend those practices, but in current times. So this is important, and he also connected with the idea that silence is cancelling the capacity to respond in the society. Kate Hudson, I started listening to her a bit late, but she also carries out an international analysis of the movements, anti-fascist movements that are being generated throughout the world against totalitarianism. This is a situation of crisis derived from the economic crisis, the also search of upsurge of Trump and the right wing in many countries, and this has generated response movements. Some of them have had success, like in Bolivia, and other places, but also that the upsurge of far right, like in the case of the Golden Dawn in Greece, in Greek, So she also referred to the No Pasarán Congress, and we need to really feel proud of this conference with this slogan of the Republicans in Spain. And we're going to be discussing important topics at the world and European level in that conference also. Manuel Ruiz has highlighted that it's important not to that it's important to rescue memory, and he's also talked about the 78 regime, where what was in the middle, in between Francoism and the transition. Well, the 500 victims of the transition, and also people like Martín Villa. Well, we have his political life, but he was a member of the board of administration of 45 companies, had 90 different positions in companies, and we need to make sure justice will be made. And also this also questions the transition, where well, it has been said that it was everything smooth and fine, but there are many things that need to be clarified. Ángel del Río, he talked about the relevance of the concepts of memory and the fighting tradition, the democratic tradition in this country. It's a moment where this has disappeared in the imaginary of the youth. And how did it disappear? Eliminating the part of time that we allocate to history as a subject in education, and also replacing it by TV time. And this means that there is a very high level of ignorance with regards to their own past among young people. And he therefore says that memory and the reflection on memory should be part of the practice of learning and the practices of learning. And here I'm referring to this concept of learning to learn, so that to make sure that people will be able to research and learn by themselves. The sites of memory are very close to all of us, but there is a wall closing us to those landmarks, to those sites. Frankie Kate also did a very interesting analysis.
Un grupo de Cádiz a través del contacto.
A group in Cádiz, and how they've seen that they are linked by the fact that they want to vindicate their family members and their dignity, and this has changed into a group that are in fact a group that is very concerned, has many different concerns: Trump, the situation of women, migrants, the constructions levels on the coast. And she's telling us that from this concern about the past, they are reaching their, or being linked by their concerns of the present time. I've tried to be very brief with this summary. Okay, we will give the floor to the organization right now, and then we will have the interventions from the public. Well, we would like to excuse the delay. We've had technical issues, and we're sorry for that. The speakers, you've been really great. You've been preparing your interventions. Can you hear, David? Yes, okay. Yes, as I said, the speakers have been working really hard for their presentations, and we're absolutely sorry for the technical issues. We're really sorry about the problem with the Manuel's video too, and we just wanted to apologize. Now I'll give the floor to a colleague for the Q&A session.
Hola, bueno, pues
Hello.
sí tenemos algunas, muy poquitas intervenciones, pero bueno,
Yes,
sí
we
hay
have
aquí
some
una
questions here. Not many.
no es tanto una pregunta como un comentario,
Well,
pero bueno, a ver
it's
qué os
not
parece.
so much a
Dice
question, but a
aquí que le
comment.
acaban de dar el Premio Nacional de Historia.
Someone says
Está escrito
that the National Award Victoria
Crímenes en la
has been
Retaguardia Roja en
awarded
Madrid. ¿Qué os
to
parece
the author
que conocéis
of
la
the
obra?
book on the red groups in Madrid. Do you know this book? Does anybody know this book? No, apparently we don't.
Pues
We're
entonces
not aware of this. Please send us this piece of information. Yes, it's something that
no hay más
appeared,
intervenciones del público.
that has been on the news today. Well, there are no other comments or interventions. In that case, I'd like to give you the opportunity to make some comments. Questions, we have just like 6-7 minutes if you'd like to discuss something. I just wanted to say that it's great to have historical researchers, all sorts, as long as they are you know, rigorous. This book, well, I don't know if it's been rigorous or not, but the title doesn't give us a good idea of what it is. It sounds, it won't be very rigorous because it sounds more of something that wants to review the past. José Luis Ledesma and many other people have been doing a very interesting research, very rigorous research. We should not be afraid of the truth. The truth is already hard enough. We don't need to make it harder. The issue is that there are some platforms, publishing houses, where they are selling essays that are said to be history, but then this book will be in discussion shows on the media. Also, there will be references to the book without a rigorous study, because the title just lets us suspect it's a revisionist book.
Sí, bueno, yo quería comentar. Sí, yo solo quería comentar una cosa.
I just wanted to say something. The effects of those facts that have been well studied, like the disbandment and the civil war, well, the effects of what's happening now, I think we should study what happened during the transition. I don't really know when the transition was over. Well, it started when the dictator died, but I'm not really sure if it's over already. And Well, earlier I said, well, I was trying to give an answer to the question that was the title of this roundtable, what can we do against the upsurge of fascism? But for me, it's simple, to be united in action. These sort of forums are very important. They're absolutely necessary. We need to meet more often, because those who are against us, they are, upsurgent because they are all together. And also, I'd like to thank the organizers and the technical people. Thank you very much. Francie, we just don't have much time left, but, well, yes, I'd like to say that I have this book here with regards to what Angel said, the fact that there are no materials to teach historical memory. This book, I am now teaching a seminar on the ghosts of Francoism. All my students are from the US, and this book has been very useful for us. I know it's a comic book, but it really is very useful. Also, with regards to what Luis said, this lack of interpretation centers. Well, we have the House of Memory in the border. For me, I'm sure you know it, but for me, this is one of these very valuable centers. It was created in November 4 years ago, and I recommend it to you. And finally, in the WhatsApp, I will put it in there. I am the director of a collection called Memory, and it's a very young publication, and we're interested in any articles related to memory. So we also invite people to send us research proposals. Well, thank you very much. This is going to help us to deepen our contacts and this necessary anti-fascist network. Well, with regard to this lack of knowledge and all this, there are several elements, and one of them is that Spain seems to be something different, an anomaly in the history of Europe, precisely because of the triumph of fascism in this country. But sometimes we forget to teach other Europeans and also in the US that this was done with those who were the winners after the Second World War that allowed Franco to stay in power in Spain. And I think all this should be connected. This should be connected with the realities of different people, because these issues are not national problems. They are collective issues for the whole of humankind, and in our case of Europe. And also there's another very important issue, this upsurge of the far right, the fact that we're trying to, to make it seem normal or rational to be able to vote in favor of parties that are of neoliberalism, and sort of make it normal for people to vote politics that are destroying the state and the social aspects, just as a way of saving us from something that would be even worse. So we need to work on ideology, and we need to act united, as Manuel said, and also we need to know each other. That's really important for interactions to take place, and also the possibility of having wider movement and also more internationalist movement, because this is part of what we do and what we are. Well, apart from that, if there are no comments or questions from anyone, nothing else? Okay, then say goodbye. I'd just like to say goodbye. Thank you very much. And I hope we will see you. I will see you very soon. Thank you for everything.